in place to keep us in chains. By show of hands, who else is sick and tired of the same? 1% trying to keep us small, trying to keep us from getting out. Minimizing the struggles they've caused, saying we're not working hard enough.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the thousands in attendance and for the millions watching at home, DCK Productions proudly brings to you the greatest podcast in the world! The greatest podcast in the world? Suck it. No, you suck it. No, you suck it. No, you suck it. No, you suck it. I appreciate it if you both suck it. Suck it!
We really should stop this fighting. Otherwise we'll miss the fireworks.
There won't be any fireworks.
And here we go.
And welcome, everybody, to Suck It. I am the great and powerful King of Kings, Prince of all that is awesome. Derek, how is everybody tonight? It is Wednesday, September 16th of this wonderful year that is 2020. And I say that with the utmost sarcasm. But, we're getting there. Getting toward the end of the year. Hopefully, January 1st will bring new, profound amazingness. But we'll see how it all rolls out and see how it all goes. And I guess November will decide whether or not we're going to be happy next year. And that's all depending on what you believe. So I guess we'll all see what happens. But we're not here to talk about that tonight. We're not here to discuss that stuff. We're here to talk fun stuff. And more specifically, music. Because my guest is a absolute legend, working with some of the greatest musicians of our time, such as Jackson Browne, Phil Collins, James Taylor, and more. I mean, Crosby, Stills, Nash. I mean, just countless records and things that he's done. As a session musician and as a touring bass player, and just amazing, amazing stuff. So, without any further ado, please welcome the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Leland Sklar. How are you?
I'm fabulous, Derek. How are you?
You know what? I could not be better.
Great. You have the best name for a podcast. I absolutely...
Well, I appreciate that.
Suck it. Suck it to me.
Exactly. My wife, I have to give my credit to my wife, though. She's the one who came up with that one.
Good for her.
I was like, that's actually kind of funny. Let's do it.
I love it. It's great.
So how's everything for you, man?
Well, as a musician, it's as bizarre as it could possibly have become this year, going from a full book through February of next year to a completely empty book. It's been pretty surreal, but the most important thing right now is just staying safe and alive to enjoy whatever the future holds.
100%. I mean, as someone who used to be a musician and someone who's obviously a huge music fan, without the training, I consider myself a music historian, but it's one of those things where I visited 10 concerts last year, and to not be able to go to one, or even have the opportunity. Well, I had the opportunity to go to one, and then it got pushed around twice, and then finally got canceled last week.
Yeah.
And to see the bands suffer, especially the ones that are unsigned, ones that have to tour all the time to make money or even get their name out there, suffering, because it's going to be the last thing that's going to come back and recover. It's going to take forever to recover.
I agree completely. Yeah, we are low man on the totem pole.
Yeah, I mean, live events is going to be crazy. I mean, and next year, if it comes back in any which way, shape, or form, it's going to be crazy because everyone's going to want to tour. Everyone's going to want to, putting out an album. Everyone's going to be doing this, and it's going to be flooded.
Yeah.
So it could be flooded with great stuff. It could be flooded with horrible stuff. We just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, my heart really, like you just said, though, my heart really goes out to like the young bands, new bands that were maybe just starting to get rolling, and all of a sudden they've hit this. And my heart goes out to all the club owners that are still paying rent and trying to keep their building afloat, but they can't do anything in them, and they're folding right and left. And also all the crew people, all the ancillary people that are involved with small gigs, large gigs. The roadies, the grips at arenas, the swag people. I mean, everybody's just really, going to be suffering for a long time for this. And I had a gig a thing I was supposed to do in May that got bumped to November, that got bumped to February, and they've just reconfirmed it for March of 22.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, people are looking long term at this point, and it's heartbreaking. Is what it is.
It really is. Again, because like you said, it's those small bands that are really taking a hit.
Yeah.
And some of those ones are the ones that are delivering some of the best music out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, even thinking about like all the graduates from schools like Berkeley and Lama and Los Angeles, here they come out of school just chomping at the bit to go out there and kick some ass and get going. And all of a sudden, they've hit a brick wall, and all that education, all that excitement that they've had really has no place to go. So, you don't want to be Debbie Downer about it, but you want to be a realist about things too. And realistically, it's a really tough time we're facing.
Yeah, I mean, because usually around this time every year, Danny Wimmer Presents, which is the biggest, festival promoter in the country, starts releasing, here's the Sonic Temple, or used to be Rock on the Range, headliners, and then we're gonna start, introducing them, and then March, or we'll go live in May, and December tickets will go on sale, but haven't heard anything. Same thing with all the different ones, and it's just like, okay, so I guess we're not gonna have anything next year, and knowing that we're that far out from the summer of next year, which is the world's loudest month in May, and everything like that. It's like we're not even we're like what, 9 months away from that, and we're already predicting nothing. Yeah,
I mean, I'm hopeful that some semblance of work will happen. I mean, it's great seeing these people doing the drive-in theater concerts now, and I mean, there's things going on. But it's not, I mean, I feel so fortunate. Like we just did 2.5 years basically with Phil Collins. And I was so grateful we got through this, without that all being shut down. So I could actually, if that becomes the last, big thing for me, it was a good one.
Yeah.
But we did, the band that I'm in right now called The Immediate Family, we did a Rock Legends cruise with Roger Daltrey and Nancy Wilson and a bunch of people in February. That was one of those like Florida, like Fort Lauderdale to the Grand Caymans and back. And right after that is when everything shut down. And they had us booked for next February, and they've canceled that. And now they're asking us to come back in February of 22. So next year, it's just, there's no way of knowing, but nobody really wants to commit, or everybody who is putting anything out there is doing it with a certain amount of legal mumbo jumbo in their contracts that's saying, look, if this is still going on, we're not going to be there, and you can't be penalized for it.
Yeah,
it's tough, man. My heart goes out to everybody, and it goes out to the public too, because one of the greatest things in life is being able to go hear live music. I mean, this is what people do to get away from maybe something going on in their lives. This is those couple hours where they can really just enjoy something and blow off some steam, and to have that taken away from the audience, to me, is also incredibly tragic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big bar hitter and brewery hitter and stuff like that, and even then, just the amount of people in bars and, obviously breweries and stuff like that have gone down to where, even if they didn't have live music that night, they're always playing music in the background.
Yeah.
And you know, in a bar or anywhere in the world you would go, you know, Journey would come on. Everyone would start singing, you know, just a small town boy at the top of their lungs,
Yeah,
or you know, Living on a Prayer. These quintessential songs,
exactly.
and we can't even go to a bar to enjoy just a radio playing with a beer in our hand.
Yeah.
You know, something as little as that has been taken away from us.
Yeah, I mean, we are basically living in this kind of a bizarre isolationist thing. I just went over and picked up dinner for my wife and I at a Mexican restaurant that we go to. You know, and I walk in there and there's 3 tables of people. You know, I mean, normally the place was packed to the gills, but the way they have to set up, and those are all outside on their patio. And you just kind of stand there for a second looking at this and thinking about 8 months ago or whatever it was that we were living on another planet. I mean, everything was different, and all of a sudden, it's just turned into this, like we went through a wormhole into an alternate universe.
Yep.
And you know, I'm going to keep my energies all positive and work, you know, and just hope for the best. But it's frustrating every day, just kind of waking up and, you know, just kind of thinking about what could have been. Because there was so much cool stuff that I had in my book that I was so excited about. That's, you know, it's either on hold or gone.
Yeah. What do you think about at least live streaming concerts, other than the drive-in shows?
The group that I'm in, we did. There's a place called the Coach House down here in Los Angeles, and we did a live stream there a few months ago. And we're going out to. DW Drums is going to let us use their sound stage and their technical facility, and we're going over there to do another concert at the beginning of October, and then we'll stream that out. I think they're great. I'm working with a whole bunch of different people that are all doing live streaming, and you just have to wrap your head around the fact that the audience that would be sitting in front of you is sitting somewhere, but they're not there with you.
Yep.
But you're going to do a show with the same intention as though they were right in front of you. And but it's a chance to play, and it's a chance for people to hear music. So it's different, but man, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, last month or a month and a half ago or whatever it was, I bought a ticket for $8 to watch a live streaming event for a band called Trivium, and they rented out a sound stage at Full Sail in Orlando, Full Sail College, and they put together a full concert, lights, the whole 9 yards. And charged $8, and they sold a ridiculous amount of tickets, and it was, you know, at least that was cool. However, you know, everything else is just like, you know, just kind of waiting, and you know, even Trivium's a pretty decent sized band, but they're not as big as some of the bigger ones, and the bigger ones aren't doing much, and it's like, guys.
Well, I mean, it's weird. I mean, Genesis was supposed to be doing a tour at the end of the year, which has been moved to, I think, next May. They're still going to rehearse at the end of this year for it, but they just still don't know whether it'll be possible. But for those guys, when they go out, it's stadium tour.
Yep.
How the hell are you going to do a stadium tour at this point when they might say, you know, the place holds, you know, 70,000 people and they're going to allow in 15,000? I mean, it's just not viable at this point. So it's just hard to know where things are headed, but the primary thing is safety at this point, because this is a virulent disease that you know, every time there's one of these gatherings like Sturgis, seeing all the bikers there, and then they're talking about 250,000 people came down with it. You know, it's just not. I've had friends die, you know, so I don't take this lightly at all. This is really some scary times. So
yeah, it really is.
See what happens, you know.
I firmly agree.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk about you for a second here. When did you first break into the business?
I would say probably the actual professional side of my career began in 1970 when I started working with James Taylor. And I met James when I was in a band in the end of the 60s out here in LA called Wolfgang. And our drummer had a friend who had a friend, and that friend was James Taylor, and he brought him to one of our rehearsals. And James, when he got his opportunity to play the Troubadour for the first time in LA, remembered me from this rehearsal. And they tracked me down and asked me if I would do this one gig with them. And basically 50 years later, I'm sort of still on the gig. It's pretty weird how it happens.
Yeah, 50 years in this business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 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 a long time.
It's a lifer.
It really is. I mean, that's longer than I've been alive. I mean,
Yeah,
it's astonishing.
well, the thing for me is it's been 50, it's actually over 50 years now. But man, I am as excited about it today as I was the day I started. And that's never waned, man. I love going in the studio and I love hitting the road.
Yeah.
You know.
You spent the majority of your time as a studio musician.
Mm-hmm.
And you've gone out on some really big tours as well. Which one do you enjoy more?
I think if somebody told me I had to make a choice, I would choose touring. I love studio. I mean, I've worked on about 2,600 albums during the course of my career, and I love the process of making music and working with all these different artists. But there's something about being on stage and the immediacy of playing to an audience. I always kind of tell people, I said, in the studio, you can play a note and scrutinize that note for a week. You can sit there and dick around with it and move it and play with it. I said, live, you play that note, it's over. You're on to the next note, So I like that part of things. But I feel fortunate that I've been able to kind of balance both. I mean, I've been on the road every single year for the 50 years. I've never had one year where I wasn't on at least one tour. And but I'm a workaholic. I mean, I love being busy. I love working, and music's been my life's blood.
Yeah.
So.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, being on a stage and getting that crowd reaction, hearing that live, getting that live feel is second to nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got up on stage for the first time at 18 years old playing guitar in front of 50 people, I was hooked. And I did that for a long time until, I just got sick of the business aspect of things, especially in the Orlando area at the time was just bad. And then, moving on to being a professional wrestler for 12 years, that live, that live feel is nothing. Nothing like it in the world.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that. But at the same time, getting to collaborate with everyone from, Phil Collins, Rod Stewart, Reba McEntire, and more, it's just like that. The creative juices get flowing with every different person, everything from country to rock, and it's just like that's a pretty hefty resume too.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I like we're talking about which would I prefer, but I'm just ultimately grateful I've never had to make the decision. That I still get to do both, and I'm still going in the studio and doing album projects. And I've actually, for the first time in my whole life, I've started just recording bass parts at home. Friends of mine and people are sending me files, and I set up a little thing here just with GarageBand, which is adequate for my needs. And so I'm, I still feel engaged, and also, one of the things too is, man, I am just as happy playing a club with 50 people as I am playing a stadium with 100,000 people in it. It's the opportunity to play music. I work with a Welsh singer named Judith Owen, who's married to Harry Shearer from Spinal Tap and Gus the Simpsons. And we were doing some gigs in north of England, and we were in a little pub there, and there's probably about 40 people in the audience. And these guys came up to me afterwards and went, "Man, last time I saw you was in Wembley Stadium. What are you doing here?" I said, "I'm playing really good music. Are you having a good time?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Done. We're good." I mean, to me, it's playing great music and seeing people enjoy it. And the numbers, I mean, the business side of all of this, the number crunchers and that side and management, they're concerned about the amount of people at a venue. But man, I could care less. If there's two people in there having a good time, I'm having a good time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I feel the exact same way. I mean, I did a stand-up comedy gig at a brewery that was socially distanced, and there was only maybe 10 people in the crowd, and I had like maybe 100 people on YouTube, but it was like it didn't matter to me. The 10 people in the crowd was just, I got the reactions I wanted. If I wanted them to boo me, they booed me. If I wanted them to laugh, they laughed. And it was still epic. And, that was the first time I've done that, pretty much all year. And it was just like, I need it back. I really need it back.
Yeah. Well, it's man, it is your life's blood. It's your juices that keep everything flowing, keeps the machine greased.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at every opportunity I can to be engaged and still feel viable through this. And there's stuff out there. I mean, I just spent today with Judith Owen, and we did a little thing in her living room of 4 songs, and she's releasing them every week. We've done a whole bunch of them, and she's got a new album in the works right now that we're working on. But she's doing these. They're not live streams, but we're recording them, and then she's just doling them out. And it was great. I had a wonderful day today playing with she and our percussionist Pedro Segundo, and it was beautiful. I feel juicy.
Absolutely, I can definitely understand that.
I could suck it.
So, with everything that's going on, and even without it going on, I mean, we're on as far as the music business goes, in the last 10 years, it's seen a dramatic turn.
Yeah.
Even prior to this, with everything that we see, where do you see the future of music being?
Boy, I have utmost confidence in the actual music. I mean, there's so many great musicians, so many great writers and singers out there. My real issue with it all, that's really is the dilemma, is how people hear it. Number one, because there's so much of it, is how do they find you, unless you've got some quirky little YouTube video or something like that. And then at that point, how do you monetize it so that you can devote yourself to your music and not have to have 1 or 2 other jobs, and you're splitting all this time away from trying to develop your skills. But I remember back when I was younger, LA had a ton of clubs, and you could go out and gig all the time in them. And so many are closed down. And that's where we all, really honed our skills, mm-hmm. and made contacts and hooked up with people. And as that disappears, I just, I don't quite know, where things are headed. But like I said, I have confidence in the talent. It's just, where does it go? Kind of in the early days, with labels, you kind of always knew you were probably going to get screwed a bit by the label. But they had a machinery in place that could get you on the radio, that could get all kinds of stuff, promotion and different things going. And so much of that doesn't exist anymore. A lot of the projects that I work on are just, privately financed and just indie projects that people have always wanted to do. And usually the phone call I get after we finish it, any idea what we can do with this? Do you know anybody we could call? And I'm going, man, I really don't, because all the people that I ever really knew in this business that had those kind of powers are gone, or they're maxed out with whatever their roster is. And you've got to come up with some amazing crap to bust in that door. So, I don't want anybody to be discouraged about the future at all, because it requires tenacity, and it's the kind of industry that if they can weed you out with a few things saying, you suck, I don't dig you, then you don't deserve to be in it. But if you're the kind of person that can listen to something like that and say, okay, I'm going to move on to the next thing, and I'm going to then you might have a shot at it, and we'll see what they can do. But
yeah, I mean, because we've come into a place in time to where, music labels don't even matter.
Yeah.
In theory, Spotify and SoundCloud are like technically, without being a music label, they're the biggest music label out there, because they have more independent artists on there than there's actual people out there signed. And it's interesting to see that.
It's interesting, but most of those people, when you really look at the number of like hits and listens that they get, and then you look at what they're able to collect as revenue, is really it's really heartbreaking. I mean, somebody's making dough off of this stuff, but it usually isn't the artist. I know that our group, we've got a Japanese label and we've got an American label. We got Quarto Valley Records in the States, and they're completely behind us and supporting us. And it's unusual. We feel really very, very fortunate to be in a situation of actually having a label that gives a shit. willing to work at and stuff. So, but it's unusual at this point.
It is. Because, like, right now, if music's the only thing that you're doing and you can't tour, if you get 1 million streams on, Spotify, that's $5,000. And, the percentage of people that are hitting that 1 million streams, even just for one song, is like 2 to 3%.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
Yeah.
And
so, it's hard. It's really hard, but I love, like, there's a lot of new artists that I end up talking to and stuff. And really, if the more tenacious ones might really still have a shot at something. And, and then there's always that hope that somebody might hear you and want to put you into like a movie soundtrack or a TV show, or, where it can elevate you to the next level. It doesn't happen often, but when it kind of does, then it can move you completely into a whole different playing field. But that usually requires exposure, being in a club and somebody comes in and hears you in a club, or you are getting airplay and there's enough hits going on you that usually the people in those kind of positions of power have somebody that's monitoring all that. And they're saying, and they'll go back to the people and say, look, this guy just got, 5 million hits on this. We should, check him out. So, it's out there, but it's in a different format than it ever was. I would hate, for me personally, I would hate to be starting now. I really feel kind of blessed to be at the tail end, the twilight of my career, rather than, the launch of it.
Yeah. Do you feel, and this is going to sound weird, do you feel it's too easy and too accessible to be able to label yourself as a musician these days?
Absolutely. I think my biggest gripe about it is that technology's been created where you don't actually have to be good, because you can go in, if you're a drummer and your time sucks, you can quantize your sound, you can fix all of this stuff. If you can't sing in key, you can pitch correct yourself. And I feel there's so many people out there that if you actually heard them being what they are before they were fixed through technology, they wouldn't have a snowball's shot in hell to be in the business. But the technologies, first off, it's cheap. I mean, I grew up in $1 million studios, and that was the norm. And all of a sudden, for a few $1,000, you can put together a little home studio, or you can actually make something slightly credible out of it. And so it's allowed people into the business that, to me, would never have normally been into it. And they can turn out a product that sounds pretty good, but it's not necessarily what they actually sound like. So if they ever have to go on the road, then you got to bring stuff that can, fix you in real time and all that. So it's as a dyed-in-the-wool professional, it gets a little tedious sometimes. I think about like being in the studio and hearing people like, you walk up to a mic and you sing, you get it in a take and you're done. Not 30 takes and then comping and then pitch correcting and all that. So I don't want to be an old fart. I mean, that's
no. I agree with you.
Yeah, but the technology's really kind of changed the whole face of this. When digital technology took over, it really was a game changer as far as the process.
Yeah, because nowadays anyone with a little bit of computer smarts and has a somewhat of an ear for music can go into Pro Tools and simulate a drum beat, simulate a guitar beat, and then auto-tune their voice and come out with a song.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. And some really are incredibly good at it and make great music. But a lot of people just it's like just thinking. I think about like guys like Mike Huckabee, and you think just because you own a bass doesn't make you a bass player. You've really got to put in the time. And one of the frustrating things is all the things like, American Idol and The Voice and all those things where you get a lot of people on those shows who have never done anything. And all of a sudden they're on a world stage. And I've done a bunch of albums with winners of those shows. And it's telling sometimes when you get in the studio with them and you realize how inexperienced they are, where all the guys like me and women like me, well, not like me, but we came up through the club scene and playing bar mitzvahs and fraternity parties and all that kind of crap, where you really develop your chops, and you don't just go from like the UPS loading dock to being a multi-platinum selling artist. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, with especially like you said, with or like even throwing America's Got Talent with that too.
Yeah,
All these talent shows. Some of them have worked and grind. And then by chance they end up on there, and then then they're finally getting their just desserts. But then there's a lot on there that I think I have a pretty good voice. Let me go ahead and try to make a name for myself. I've never done it before.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I have a friend who lives in Tennessee that was season 12 of The Voice. He placed 5th. His name is Josh Gallagher. He's a country artist.
Mm-hmm.
And dude is just spectacular. I mean, and how he fell into The Voice was pretty interesting. He was playing a club gig. The club owner knew one of the producers for the show, videotaped him without even knowing, sent it to him. The next thing you know, he's getting off stage. The producer's calling him and says, "Hey, come to LA." So it's like, that's a pretty good story. But like, there's not a lot of stories like that for people that have that have really grinded it out there.
Yeah.
And that's what really makes it really sad, because the art of picking up a guitar and playing for real, or the art of playing drums or bass, whatever, has really gone by the wayside.
Yeah. Especially when you hear people like, I've always been a guitar guy. I love guitar. And when you hear like even some of the artists now, some of the really lame ass artists that talk about, like guitar really sucks and all that. I mean, hearing great virtuoso guitarists as compared to guys that just play rhythm and stuff, I just miss that. There's so much of the music now isn't, just these amazing guys. Maybe in some areas, maybe within metal and some of the other formats, but for the most part, when I got to work with all, the guys like Steve Lukather and Tommy Bolin and all these cats, you're just listening to just monstrous facility and taste. And so I don't know, I like I keep saying, I want to be positive about all this stuff. And I don't begrudge anybody who tries to get into the music business and can pull it off. It's good for them, because it is a slog. It is a hard grind.
Yeah.
But the payoff, not necessarily financially, but the payoff emotionally is so deep.
Exactly.
It's worth all the crap you go through to get there.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. I mean, even with the state of the music industry right now, as far as sitting in a studio, even a year ago, prior to the pandemic, it was sitting in a studio for 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever, making an album and then dropping it and it going platinum was rare. Now it's all about the singles and the EPs, and which is weird.
Yeah, I totally agree on that one. I mean, and we're subject to it too, because this band that I'm in now, we've basically most of us have been together for 50 years. It's the guys who I started with Danny Korchmar and Waddy Wachtel and Russ Kunkel and myself, and then another friend, Steve Postel, joined us. It's one of those situations, though, where even with us, we're doing our own videos. We got an EP coming out. We've had 2 singles out now. We got an EP coming out. Our album is coming out next year, and we'll do another EP before then. And Denny Tedesco, who made the movie The Wrecking Crew about the great LA, they're doing a documentary film about our band too. And all this stuff was in motion, and then all of a sudden the pandemic hit, and it's still happening, but it just slowed the pace down. So all of a sudden we're like doing EPs and stuff just to keep the brand alive until we can hit harder with a real album, which is it's long finished. We did the album, we were ready to release it this year, and then all this happened. But it's without the pandemic, it still was tough. It's just really put the skids on so much stuff, and we will come through it at some point. we would have come through it a lot sooner if it had been handled properly. But that's a whole other show, and we're not going to go there.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
One of the things that you mentioned was, there's still a lot of great, there's not a lot of great guitarists out there anymore, and maybe in the metal field, but other than that, you don't really know of much, or however you worded it. I'm paraphrasing. So, with that being said, in almost every other continent, other than the United States, in the North America,
yeah,
rock and metal is the biggest genre still. If
Yeah.
you go into Europe or Sweden, especially Germany, all those places,
yeah.
even China and Japan, rock and metal is still number one. Why do you feel rock is, and I don't agree with it, but why do you think that people believe that rock is dead here in America?
Yeah, that's a hard one to really comprehend. A number of years back, I ended up going on the road with Toto, and we show up in Finland, and there'd be like 15,000 people show up to a gig in a little town in Finland, and then we come back to the States, and they're offered like opening for Rick Springfield. I don't know. It just doesn't seem to carry the weight here that it does overseas. There's a far more dedicated audience when you, especially like going to Japan is like insane, just because the audience is so dedicated to you that they know more about you than you know about yourself. And I found that too, like say in Germany, in France, and Italy, it just all carries a kind of a different attitude towards it. I don't know if maybe there was just so much exposure to so many different things here that people really don't hunker down and appreciate the really great stuff, but they're constantly, there's always a turnover of what they're listening to and not really dedicating themselves to bands. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I've seen that in terms of going overseas, and you really see how audiences act to bands from America and other countries as compared to the respect that they get when they're home.
Yeah,
and some can pull it off, but there's a lot really can't. And I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, if you look at European festivals compared to American festivals, two of the biggest out there are Download Fest and Rock am Ring in Germany. And if you look at videos of them online and look at YouTube videos of just one band that is quote unquote not respected here in America or doesn't get the credit they deserve here in America, the amount of people that don't speak English singing their songs to them back in English, and crowds of 150, 200,000 in some cases.
Yeah,
it's astounding. I remember this was back in the mid 90s before the breakup of Russia. Metallica had gone over to Russia and played a Russian over there in Soviet Russia. And it was really contained by, Russian military and stuff like that. But still, it was like 150,000 people that showed up. And, not a lot of Russians speak, a lot of English.
Yeah.
But literally, or at least at the time, obviously it's changed since then, but the amount of, and there's videos of it, these people singing every word of every Metallica song back to them.
Yeah.
We would never have that here in America, and that's sad.
Yeah, well, also, it's pretty rare in America that you would have any other act singing in anything but English. I mean, you do end up with some Latin, groups that end up having a Latin audience and stuff. But for the most part, I've worked with like lots of Japanese artists, with French artists, with Italian artists. They can never come here and tour because the American audience wouldn't be dedicated to them singing in their language. They would want to hear everything. But I had a similar experience. We went and did a peace concert in Moscow in '87. And I went over with, it was James Taylor, Bonnie Raitt, Santana, and the Doobie Brothers, and then some Russian acts. And the same thing, the whole audience in there. It was the place, there was probably as many police in there as there was audience. And but man, everybody was singing everybody's songs, and I know most of those people did not speak English, but they were singing them all back. And we had the same thing with Phil Collins. When we went out in early 2000s, we were playing Latvia and Estonia and going through all those places. We went through the Middle East, and all those crowds were singing every song back to him. And you know that a lot of them, they're just learning the songs phonetically.
Yeah.
But that's a dedicated audience. They are there for you.
Correct.
Yeah. And I love it. I love them, man. It's such a joy to go to those places and not have an audience that's blasé.
Yeah. The amount of fly by night fans here in America, and again, it's nothing against us.
Yeah,
as it's nothing against the audience. It's the few that still have power and record labels telling us what to like and what to listen to.
Yeah.
So it's nobody's fault as far as the audience goes. But they're so it's constantly evolving. Right now, the biggest thing is rap and R&B and hip hop, and I find that odd because it takes no less than 50 people to put one of those albums together, when a rock band can go in there with 6, 4 plus a manager and an engineer and put out one of the greatest albums ever.
Yeah.
It's weird that they're spending more time and money on something that is producing the same amount of money as everybody else, but it's like it's just weird. It's just strange.
Well, it's like some of these albums out there, and I look at them, and you look at some of the songs, and there's like 12 writers on it. And then you look, and there's like every track has a different team of producers on it. And you go, man, I like going in with one producer who works with the artist and has a concept for what needs to be done. They're musical enough to understand how to put this all together. You put together, if it's a band, it's a band. If it's a single artist, you put together a great band to work with them and have great songs, and you're done. I mean, it's easy, but you see some of these other projects where it's like watching the end of a movie, and all of a sudden there could be 3 characters in the movie, but there's going to be 5 minutes of credits running by of all the people that had to be there to make these 3 people, function.
Yeah. One of the biggest, I'm not really sure if I should call it a con job or just somebody who's really, really, really smart. But one of the biggest examples of that today is, Post Malone.
Mm-hmm.
Because Post Malone, at his core, is a metal guy. He played in metal bands and rock bands all throughout his high school, and even into his 20s. And then only converted over to, rap, R&B, whatever, he has within the last, since he made it big. And now he's like, you know what, he made his name now. He wants to, do other things. I mean, even his last album, he collaborated with Ozzy,
Mm-hmm.
and it's weird because, people are knowing that, this is the good stuff, but I'm going to go ahead and come over to this side of the, the tracks just to make a name for myself. And then I'm going to start, bringing stuff to the masses. Do you feel in a situation like that, that's a smart move?
Well, I can't say it's not a smart move if it suddenly escalates your career to a whole level that you never saw before. But sometimes the insincerity of it is a little. It's kind of like even looking at somebody like a monstrous musician like Herbie Hancock, and then like he got the most attention when he did like this video with kind of a robotic thing and all this. It was probably like not the best thing he's ever done, but man, it got him, airplay and attention. So it's hard to know when these people kind of see, maybe the grass is greener somewhere else and they go there. And if they can, develop an audience there and then maybe, be able to go back to what they really want to do and take that audience with them, it may be to their benefit. I don't know. I've never really been involved in anything like that where somebody's, gone from one genre to another and gotten success in it and then tried to go back.
Yeah, I'm curious about, especially like look at someone like Taylor Swift, who started as a country artist and then took off, and then all of a sudden overnight she's a pop artist. And it's just weird. you know, how some people go about making themselves a name in this business.
Well, she certainly had an incredible marketing machine.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think there was anything that's happened in her career that wasn't deeply thought out and premeditated. And they had the bank to do it. And also it's also different too. Like when you have somebody like her, and her initial audience was, you know, kind of young girls wanting to be like her and stuff. And then all of a sudden you try to move into adulthood and figure out where you're going to go with that, because, you know, it's like being in Menudo or one of those kind of bands. You know, you have the same shelf life as leaving some cottage cheese out in the sun, you know, and you're going to curdle pretty fast if you don't do something about it. So with those kind of artists, it's really, you know, it's a business. They're a brand more than they're an artist, I think. And it's probably a whole group of business people that are working with them that are making these decisions on how we move them into another place, and the kind of things they say to be a little bit more cutting edge rather than, you know, easy listening. But, you know, some people have done it. It's not that common. I mean, Taylor was kind of a phenom in that way of really being able to pull that off. And, you know, but, you know, I like, you know, I just try to think of things being true to what really you're about.
Yeah.
And not look at, you know, what's going to bring in the biggest bucks for me kind of thing. And then sell your soul to
Sony or BMG.
Yeah, I mean, if you're knocking on the door and there's a guy behind the desk that goes, "Suck it," you know, how bad do you want your gear? How bad do you want your gear?
Exactly. I mean, looking, you know, at some of these movies that have come out about some, you know, legendary bands, whether it be Elton John or, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody with Queen, you know, it shows you the real trials and tribulations. It's fictionalized as well, but it really shows you what they went through as far as with some of these labels. I mean, the story of, you know, Freddie and Queen walking out that one day from that label because they didn't want to air Bohemian Rhapsody is a real story. Yeah. And they caught a lot of shit for that. And, you know, but that kind of stuff still happens today, but people are more willing to cave.
I think so. I think there's more, I'm not going to say desperation, but I think there's more wanting it so bad that you'll kind of do whatever it takes, you know, because the opportunities are fewer for a group like Queen. If what they had, the goods that they had, somebody was going to buy, and they were going to make it because the band and Freddie was that good.
Oh my God.
So it would have happened. And, you know, when you see those kind of things fictionalized in a movie, you kind of got to figure that what you're seeing in that movie is probably as best as that, you know, that moment was, and it was probably a lot darker.
Oh yeah,
than that. So, but it was that tenacity, you know, of knowing this is special, this is really good, and if you don't like it, then, you know, screw you, we're out of here.
Yeah,
and it takes balls to do something like that, and you got to have confidence in yourselves and stay true to what you believe in, as compared to being chasing, you know, the next trend and listening to somebody who basically may not really know much of anything about music, but they've been put in a position of power. And I mean, that's why I ended up putting a producer switch on my bass. I've got a switch that doesn't do anything. But if I'm working with somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about and they're asking for things that don't make any sense, I make sure they see me flip the switch, and then they're usually happy. But it doesn't do anything.
I gotcha.
It's a placebo.
Yeah, I was going to say that. You know, looking back at your time in this business.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be, you know, your favorite album that you worked on, or the favorite time that you know, the favorite time period, or the favorite artist you've worked with, what would you say would be the greatest time period for you in this business?
I think for recording, I would probably think in the 70s, because there was so much going on. There were so many great artists being signed. Labels, man, just were signing everybody that came in the door, and tons of them were great. So we were working on an average of 3 to 4 sessions a day, 6 days a week for like a decade.
Wow.
It was amazing. But there's been special things in every decade since then. But that was a pretty intense one. Plus, we were all neophytes, man. We were just, I went from having only been in the studio once to cut some demos with a band I was in to being a first call studio musician overnight. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how to get sounds and, what's a DI, and, all these things that came with that territory, because your butt was on the line every day. They wanted product, and they wanted the best you could deliver without bells and whistles and tricks. So you really had to have your A game on every single day you went to work. And so we learned really hard and really fast. And I was fortunate from my standpoint that I've always been like an ADD, ADHD kind of personality. So I could hunker down and focus really fast on what was needed, and dug my heels in deep and went for it. And it paid off. I was fortunate, but that was a great period for me.
I'm sure. I can only imagine. I mean, especially the 70s into the 80s. I mean,
yeah.
For me, I'm an 80s kid, and some of the greatest things that came out of that generation, and just amazing. I mean, I remember being 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, and I still remember it to this day. What brought me into the music business and just maybe obsessed was the Michael Jackson Thriller video.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, that young age, I should have been pissing my pants. I mean, I should have been scared. But there was just something about the aura, something about the sound, something about the guitars, and not so much the dancing, but the entertainment factor that man brought to the screen.
Yeah,
that just blew me away. Even at 5 years, however old I was, 5 or 6, and then a few years later, discovering this dude with a curly ass hair and he's wearing these outlandish suits on stage that always had women around him and prints, and then like, oh my God, what is this thing he's playing? How is he doing that with his fingers? And then 87, 88, whatever year it was, the year I moved to Florida, I remember listening to Metallica for the first time. And I was like, holy crap. I mean, it was just one thing after the other. And, it was just astonishing to me. And that era just it still blows me away. So it's interesting that, that you say the 70s and I say the 80s, but still they're very, parallel.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly, if I'm saying the 70s, it roared through the 80s too. I mean, I've worked, through every decade, and there's been great stuff throughout every one of them. So, trying to nail down one is not easy, because as soon as I think about that period, then I'm immediately kind of drifting off thinking about something from the 80s. I'm going, God, that was so cool. And then suddenly the 90s pops up and you're going, oh, that was great. I mean, for me, I hooked up with Phil Collins in the 80s, and that was one of the best things in my life, was working with Phil.
Yeah.
So
I can only imagine. I mean, that's got to be, just the hugest, point of pride in your life.
It was amazing. I mean, I love Phil dearly. We talk, pretty regularly, and but that whole period through the 80s, especially when he suddenly hit huge, it was like this unbelievable world that opened up to all of us in there, and I treasure it. And also, man, he's still one of the best drummers I've ever worked with, and I've worked with all of them. And Phil is just can't play anymore because of his back got screwed up by bad surgeries and stuff. But man, when he would sit down at that kit, his pocket was so deep and so good.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that he was a drummer.
Yeah, and I always tell people, I said, if you were walking down the street and bumped into Phil Collins and didn't know who he was, and you guys had a conversation, and if you said to him, so what do you do? The first thing he would say is, I'm a drummer. More than a songwriter, more than a singer, more than a front guy, more than any of that stuff. he loved playing drums more than anything.
Yeah. And same goes for Dave Grohl.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave Grohl is a great singer, great songwriter, great guitarist, but he loves playing the drums.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty obvious. Nirvana, when
Oh my God.
he was great at it.
Yeah. I mean, and then even for him to continually collaborate with other bands, and he just wants to play drums. I mean, I remember in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, whatever it was, when he was playing with Queens of the Stone Age.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people, he was on all their different records, and he went on tour, and he was even in their music videos, but he specifically asked in the music videos to be blackened out and just be a silhouette, because he didn't want to detract from, the people that he was playing with, which was really cool.
Oh,
but
he's
he's
great.
amazing. He's an amazing man. And that's actually a point I wanted to bring up as far as music outside of this country. A while back, I can't remember what year it was, specifically with Foo Fighters. They were it was either Australia or New Zealand, and they were playing the song "The Best of You," and they were at a concert and had like 150, 200,000 people there, and everyone started jumping up simultaneously, and they actually caused an earthquake.
Oh, man.
It actually registered on the Richter scale, just because of the passion and the love that they had for that music. And that's the kind of, thing I was talking about before, is that passion and drive that music brings, worldwide. And it just blows me away.
It's amazing. I think one of the most moving experiences I ever had on stage was we went down with James Taylor. We did the first Rock in Rio festival. And then we came back to Brazil and toured again. And when we got to Sao Paulo, we played a soccer stadium. I think it was like 110,000 seats in the place. And we started playing his song, Only a Dream in Rio. And all the audience was sitting there with cigarette lighters. And on the beat, they were flicking their lighters. But because of the delay and the size of the stadium from the stage, we were looking out at waves of fire going from the front to the back over and over. We almost stopped playing, man. We were freaking out. We were just like almost crying. It was so intense. And we were thinking, I don't think this would happen anywhere else. But man, the Brazilians are an amazing audience.
Yeah.
And it was something so special. And it's those kind of moments that are indelibly etched in your memory of these things.
Yeah, Brazil, even Mexico.
Oh yeah, Mexico.
People love going there. I mean, there's just something different about going to another country and just having that love being spread to you back from another, people that don't speak your language, singing back to you, and just that appreciation is just unreal. It's
an energy that's palpable and pretty hard to find in any other career. I mean, I know athletes, they get out on the field and they get in big stadiums and stuff and the crowd's going crazy. But there's something about having an audience directly singing your music back at you. And it becomes like, like a Vulcan mind meld or whatever. It's like, and you become one with the audience at that point, and it becomes a giant organism.
Yeah. A lot of my friends, even my family, give me a lot of flack for this, but what we're talking about here really kind of proves that point. If I'm, I subscribe to Amazon Music, and if I had a choice to listen to an entire album that was recorded live versus listen to that song in the studio, I'm picking the live version every time.
Mm-hmm.
I have more live versions of songs in my phone on a playlist than I do studio versions. I'll have 3 and 4 versions of that same song from 3 or 4 different concerts because, they just put it on 3 or 4 different live albums.
Yeah.
And the reactions are pretty much universal.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 different versions of songs from Slipknot on my phone from 3 different concerts. A Mexico one, one that they did in London, and I can't remember what the other one is, but it's like, damn, to get those reactions in 3 different parts of the world is just, and this hear the crowd in the background, it's still, even though I'm not there, it's like I can picture myself there, especially if you've been to a concert to where you can picture yourself at that show, and then even if it's at another venue, not even the same time frame, a different tour,
Yeah, of course.
you can still brings you back to that. Every time I hear a Slipknot song now, I can go back to 2001 when they were touring with Mudvayne, or I can go back to last year when I saw them last year with Volbeat and Mastodon, and it's just like it just brings you back.
Yeah, absolutely. And also the thing is, if you're hearing all those things, if it's really a great band, all of those are going to be slightly different performances, because you perform different every night. It's a different circumstance every night. When you play studio, you're going to hear it one way for the rest of your life, that way.
Yeah.
So, hearing live performances, if the band's good, I mean, the thing that sometimes bugs me about, live recordings is how much of it really is live and how much did they go back in the studio and fix after they did their live album. Because there's like so much wrong with the album. Sometimes the only thing left is the audience, and then they've kind of gone in. But if it's a really great live recording, it's fun to hear bands like that, because there's an energy that happens on stage live that no matter how good you are, you're not going to muster that same energy in a studio situation as compared to being in front of an audience.
Yeah, exactly. And the way I know a good live concert album, there's exceptions. The way I know a good concert album or live album is if the band will literally record every single stop on that tour.
Yeah.
And then go back and listen to every single one and say, okay, this is the best one from this, this is the best of this is the best of this. And then you hear, thanks San Francisco. Oh, hey, thanks Oregon, and then okay, you got the real thing there because they picked the best songs from each, So yeah, that's how I know.
Yeah, that's the best one. Still, one of my favorite live projects I was ever involved in was Jackson Browne's Running on Empty album. And we had a remote truck with us, and we were recording in hotel rooms, in the bus, all the gigs and everything. And it turned out to be just a perfect documentary of an amazing tour at the end of it. And there were pieces from all throughout the tour on the album, as compared to throwing all you're shooting your whole wad into one show or two shows and then hoping that's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
It's a different commitment when you're doing, multiple nights of recording, but to me, that's where you can really put together like the most amazing experience for everybody.
Yeah. Again, there's nothing like seeing a live band.
Yeah.
There's really not. I mean, I have a new favorite band that I've been following a lot lately that I discovered about 2 years ago. And I saw them 4 times last year because luckily they were on tour with a different band every 3 months. So I got to see them a couple different times, 4 different times. And, each time it was different. Each time the crowd was different. Each venue was different. And it was just electric, and it didn't get boring at all. And
Right.
it just, I miss that so much.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is really, we're kind of going full circle back to where all of this started, tonight. Is really that's the heartbreak of all of this stuff, is that thing is really is the lifeblood of the community. And regardless if you like rock, country, classical, whatever, but music is really one of the things that is the most humanistic experience, and to have that taken away at this point is really, it's frustrating, it's heartbreaking, it's aggravating, it's everything, because the people who love making music are desperate to make music, and the people who love hearing music are desperate to hear music, and we just don't know when that's gonna come together again.
Yeah, and again, it's extremely unfortunate, because I mean, as much as I love, coming down to my studio an hour before the showtime and just turning on my, my Amazon Alexa and just jamming out to songs, it's or blasting my radio in my car.
Yeah,
there's just nothing like seeing, that guy up on stage, or 10 guys up on stage, like with a Slipknot, just delighting the crowd, and it's unreal. It's unreal.
It's unreal, and I'll tell you, and like I said before too, and for me, it's just as electric if you're in a little dive bar and there's a great band playing, and you're close enough to smell them. You know, it's great, man. Just some sound pressure in the room, and just everybody's like in sync, man. Everybody's going, and to me, it's as close to heaven as I would ever want to be.
Yeah. And you bring up a great point there. I mean, there's a local lady around here, and she's done studio musician stuff like that as well. Her name is Holly Montgomery, and she has her own band, and she does some studio stuff as well, and then has another band that she works with out in LA. And whenever she's playing here locally in the DC area, me and my best friend always go see her. And she does a lot of cover stuff most of the time, but regardless of what venue she's at, whether it's a dive bar or a brewery or just a bigger setup, when she's playing up there, she's feeling that music more than and you can feel it, and everyone's singing along, everyone's just joining in, and it's just, again, it's magical. So, with all that being said,
yeah.
Do you feel? Because I have my own opinions about this. Mm-hmm. With the making of music, do you feel it's still important to make, or even relevant to make full-length albums anymore?
Well, it's certainly in my heart of hearts, coming from my history, I love full albums. I love when people have put the effort into their projects to where there is a concept. Because we used to love, man, when we would go into, like, after we cut all the tracks and we figured out order, we'd go to the place and we hear that first track go. That's where we wanted the second track to begin. Figuring out time between tracks, and how are you going to end the A side, and how are you going to start the B side emotionally. All that stuff meant the world to me, just like album art did. This day and age, it doesn't seem like people are still doing it, but certainly it isn't the standard, where it was the standard when I was coming up in the business. I love having something that's thought out enough where there is a beginning and an end to an album, and it takes you on a journey. As compared to, when things got to the point when people were, listening to CDs and stuff like that, where they could hit random. They could pick like the 2 tracks on an album that they liked and just put them on an endless loop and listen to them. It's fine for them if that's what they want to hear. But to me, that kind of takes away the journey for me. And so I love a full-on conceptual album. I mean, it doesn't have to be like, like a Queen record where you're doing that, or a Beatles album. But if it isn't in the cards for people, and they just want to, if they've written a couple of songs and they want to get them out there, release those songs and then work on some more and release them as they come along. It's just as valid at this point.
It is.
To me, anything that can get your music out there to a place where people can hear it and discover you. This is what I do on my YouTube channel now that I've got, is I'm constantly showing new stuff and new old stuff, where people that are there said, God, I never heard of them before, but I'm digging that. I'm going to go back and check them out. And then they write back and they go, oh, I love them, man. It's incredible. Thanks for turning me on to them. So I think anything that gets you out there is completely valuable. But if I was doing a project, I would love to be doing, like with our band, we did our album, but because of the circumstances now, we're releasing several EPs before the album comes out, and digging into, we cut way overcut tracks. So we're releasing some songs on the EPs that aren't going to be on the album. So we're not being redundant about it. But it's just a brave new world, and you just kind of have to figure out what works for you. And some people want to get out there, but they don't have enough material for an album. Yeah. So, put out what you got.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of where I was going with it too, because I agree with you on all of that. There's something like a full-length album. But at the same time, if you're just going to put your heart and soul into a couple singles and then just kind of throw together a couple tracks just to get 10 songs on an album, just put out the singles.
Yeah, I think Zappa used to call it filler poo.
It still is.
Yeah, it is. You know, you got a couple of great songs, and then you got to put some other crap on to fill out your obligation to finish an album. That's a complete waste of time and money, and I wouldn't want to subject my listeners to having something great and then followed by something that kind of sucks.
Yeah. And you even mentioned it yourself too. You know, you've had, you brought in some other, you've highlighted a lot of music on your channel, which I have done as well. Because I feel it's important.
Yeah.
For 2 months straight, I was bringing on bands that were performing live performances on the show to highlight who they are and try to give them a national exposure.
Great.
And they could not have been more appreciative. The looks on their faces, even though they were probably in their basement, and there's a couple that were in a studio, but they put in all the types of effort. And I've turned on a lot of people to some of their stuff, and it's pretty awesome. Like it's amazing.
Well, and it's great too, because like by doing what you do, you're sitting in a position of power that can be really used in such a positive way. And I think right now, with people being locked down, anything that gives them an opportunity to find pleasure and enjoyment and stuff is so necessary, because what we're exposed to on a daily basis can put you in a deep hole of depression really fast.
Yep.
So I think it's absolutely critical to have shows like yours. I love doing the show. I mean, mine came out of the pandemic. I mean, I had no idea I was starting a show, and all of a sudden it took off. And I think it's important for me to feel engaged in the industry that I love. And it's also important to feel connected to the audience that I love. And they've responded in the like to me. So it's great to, under the circumstances, to still have a pretty cool relationship going, musically with people.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Like I said, I mean, I've been turned on to so many good, bands now because of what I did. And it was just like, it was, I couldn't have, planned it better, thankfully.
Yeah.
And it turned out fantastic. And, but going back to the album talk.
Yeah.
One of the things that, like I said, I do enjoy the full length album, but what I enjoy more than anything are concept albums.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you start with that first beat, and then it goes through all 12, 13, 10, whatever songs, and it tells a complete story.
Yeah.
And I miss that. There's not a lot of bands that do that anymore.
Yeah. I had fun. I worked with, there was an Australian artist named Billy Thorpe, and we did an album called Children of the Sun. And it was that same kind of thing. It was like a space epic and all this stuff. And people would just say, man, I put my headphones on and I sat down, and I was like in the zone until this thing ended. It was so, just blew my mind. And it was like one of those things you go, that's so cool, that they're understanding where this thing's coming from and that they're partaking in it.
Yeah, there's one of my favorite bands of all time that does. They've done one or two non-concept albums, but every single one of their albums have pretty much been concept albums. It's a band called Coheed and Cambria.
Mm-hmm.
And what they've done with their albums, they tell these elaborate stories, but then they also comic book authors, and they write their comic books as well, and they everything's intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes this full-length experience of just ridiculousness, and it's almost like you can't just go, I really want to hear this one particular song. You can't, because you have to go back and you have to listen to that whole album.
Yeah.
There's a feeling behind it. And, because if you hear one song, just if you have it all random in your phone and just on shuffle, and then it's like, you hear that song, it's like, oh shit, now I need to go back and listen to that whole album.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
There's a purpose and an intention when people would make albums like that. I mean, it is meant to be viewed as a whole. It would be like going to an art gallery and walking up to a painting and looking at the corner of it and kind of digging the brush strokes and all that. But what you really need to do is stand back and take in the whole thing. And those albums like that to me they're really gems like
They
that.
really are.
That was a real, even if it wasn't like storyline conceptual, but all those records we did in the 70s with James Taylor and Jackson Browne and Ronstadt and the Cat Stevens and all these people from there, they were really thinking of an album in its entirety. They weren't thinking of individual tracks as much as how did this flow into that emotionally, and it took you on a journey.
Yeah.
Now, I love that too.
Yeah, that journey of a good album is rare these days.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, in the last 15 years, I can only think of maybe 3 or 4. Well, with the exception of the Cody and Cambria stuff. But outside of that, 3 or 4 that have just like, I've listened cover to cover and felt every vibe along the way.
Yeah.
And that's even more sad.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of sadness about all that too. And like I said just before, I miss album art. I miss picking up an LP and looking at artwork of inserts that they would put in the albums that were like bonus things that you could get out of them.
Yep.
I mean, it was an entire package, and also the process of playing a record, of having your turntable and dusting off the album and setting it on the turntable and watching that needle go down, and then when that side's over, it comes up and you clean it. It's like a Japanese tea ceremony. I mean, it can really be a pretty zen thing to listen to an album in those circumstances, as compared to having your entire musical experience be some earbuds coming out of your phone.
Exactly. I mean, even though this was before my day, I still have know people that were experienced it and have talked about it. But like going back to Black Sabbath and the Vertigo days,
Mm-hmm.
Putting out an actual record, and then throwing in a poster along with that.
Yeah.
And that first excitement of opening up that not only seeing it on the front and the back, the artistry of the album, and then before you even pull out the record and put it on the record player, opening up that poster and just acknowledging how awesome it is, and then putting on that album and just looking at that poster, looking at that cover, and just going, shit.
Yeah. It was like a completely encompassing experience to have all of that stuff there for you. Yeah. And then I mean, then depending on the system you had, you also just the fidelity sometimes of listening to a great mastered album through a good sound system is like nothing else.
Correct.
And it's kind of like people, you're either going to go to the Cinerama Dome and see a movie huge, or you're going to watch it on your phone. I mean, it's 2 completely different experiences.
Yeah.
Given my druthers, I would rather sit in a theater and watch a thing on a big screen with a big sound system.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And even back then, going as far to talk about like, before music videos were popular, like bands like Pink Floyd did The Wall, the movie, and, you got to experience the music in a different way. Again, it's all about the artistry behind it, not just putting paper to pencil. I mean, pencil to paper, and then putting it onto a track. It's everything from A to Z, and it's just, including the artwork and the theory behind it, and just how you want to present it to your fans in order to get the ultimate feeling.
Yeah, one of the things for me that was always great, and I really feel bad for people in this day and age. I mean, a lot of towns still have like that boutique record store. We have like Aardvark out here in LA and so. But the whole act of going through bins of albums and finding stuff that intrigued you because of how the album looked. You didn't even know what the music was in it, but you found something really appealing about that kind of sensual quality of going through racks of albums, like going to a flea market and somebody's got all these boxes of albums and just kind of going through them, as compared to like going online and trying to find something
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing. You might be able to, preview, you know, 18 bars or something of something online. But that whole act of, going to a record store and going through all these bins of all these different albums and making discoveries there, for me growing up, that was a real essential part of growing up.
Yeah, I mean, we can't even these days. I mean, with the exception of the few record stores here and there. I remember in the '90s, getting some sense of that. It was a lot different, obviously. But
Yeah.
in the '90s, doing that with CD stores,
Yeah.
or even used CD stores,
Yeah.
and getting that idea of it, and that was really cool. But we don't even have that experience anymore. I mean, not even Best Buy carries CDs anymore.
I know. I mean, when you used to have Tower Records and, or, back in the day with Peaches in Atlanta down.
Oh my God, Peaches.
Yeah. I mean, those kind of things. We did a live in store with our group in Peaches back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all different now. And again, I'm going to reiterate and say that the last thing I want to become is the old fart. I don't want to be one of those guys where, you sound like grandpa talking about stuff. And well, in my day, but there are things that were really amazing that are long gone, and I do miss them. And there's, certainly if I was going to have brain surgery, I'd really rather be having it now than I would have 30 years ago. But
yeah,
but there are certain things that really were amazing. The club scene that we had in LA and all the music stores and and the studios that are gone, where there was a studio on every corner in those days, and they were good studios.
Yeah.
And they're all gone. So, there are certain things that you do have fond memories of that you lament their passing, but at the end of the day, they're gone, and you can't sit there and bitch about it. You move on, and you acquire what's needed for today.
Yeah. And I don't think, either one of us are, being that Debbie Downer, that old fart that, said back in my day. I don't think we're doing that. If anything, especially with records, they're making a comeback. And if anything, I think that this conversation, to an 18-year-old that never has thought about it, there's a lot of people out there that are still producing records.
Absolutely.
And some of your favorite artists are producing records. Buy one.
Yeah, absolutely. Support the industry. When we're out on the road with, like the last tour I did with Judith Owen, we sold more albums than we did CDs after the show. People they're hungry for them, and it's really nice to finally have turntables being used for something other than
scratching.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of machinery, and it's a beautiful process to sit and listen to a record. So, indulge yourself and enjoy it, support all this.
Yeah. And especially because, the analog sound cannot be replicated digitally.
Yeah.
If you take nothing else from this conversation, buy a record.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that for me it's another one of those things where the old farterism becomes, an issue where I don't want to be in a studio with a young band and start talking about analog to them because they've never heard it, and you sound like you're from another era. But if they ask me what was it like recording to tape and analog and all that, man, I am happy to share my knowledge with them. I just don't want to bring it to the table where I sound like I'm out of step.
Yeah. And what's funny about it is, even in the last 20 years, people were still recording on tape, and a lot of people don't even realize it. Hell, some of our, most recognizable TV shows were recorded on reel to reel. And people don't even realize it because they just thought, at turn of the century, it was all digital. And that's no much.
Yeah.
And people missed a lot because of that.
Yeah, I agree.
But, if nothing else, we're talking about, because what used to be popular in the 50s, 60s, and 70s with drive-ins and records and stuff like that is making a comeback. And now it's never been a better time to be a fan of music. being a musician just breaking in, we had that conversation. But
Yeah.
being a fan of music and hell, even the movie industry, things that made that, certain generations great that died off are making a comeback. And
Yeah.
now is that time to really embrace
And support.
exactly. Embrace and support. And that's honestly what I wanted to get out of this conversation with you was that fact of it. So yeah, we can say, whatever we were saying, but it wasn't at all a Debbie Downer. It was all a buy that record because you want to feel it in a way that you've never felt it before.
Yeah, and you want that you can have that experience until your last breath.
Yep.
It's not something like you age out on or anything like that. You will hopefully be enjoying music. You might be laying there in a hospice with headphones on, listening to the music you loved as the last thing in your life, and that's not a bad way to go out.
Yeah, we could have come on this conversation, and just did a huge profile on you because you deserve a huge profile, and we did a little bit of that here and there. Yeah, well, I mean, that's you, but I wanted to have a genuine conversation about music and the industry and the feeling of it, and remind people why music exists. That unifying feeling. And, I'm glad you came along with me on that journey of it. And I appreciate all of your opinions and all of everything that you were saying, because it's all true. Does it matter if...
I totally appreciate the direction you took this show. I had no idea. I had no expectations of what our discussion would be. And I'm thrilled that it went this way, because if anybody's curious about me, Google,
Exactly.
But right now, this is, I think, really important, because our world and our industry is in precarious place, and I think it's really important that people, support on whatever level is possible at this point, and hopefully it'll get better where they can start going to clubs and concerts and enjoying the shared community of music.
And again, that was the whole idea of this conversation. Because again, you have a whole, you Google your name and there's a Wikipedia page that comes up and tells us everything about you. And then you can see pictures and, the whole 9 yards. People have seen that. I wanted a whole other conversation with you, and I'm glad that it went the way it did. So thank you very, very much.
It's a pleasure.
It really, really was.
Anytime, man. Anytime you do it, I'm here for you.
Yeah, dude, I could literally have this conversation 100 different times, and we would say 100 different things, because I mean, I love music, and it's in my soul, man.
Yeah.
And you've been a part of hundreds of albums that I've enjoyed throughout the years, so it's been an honor and a privilege, man.
Well, thank you, Dick, man. It's a real pleasure for me too, man, and I look forward to maybe some more visits down the line.
Absolutely, and I would look forward to that very much.
Can I be a whore for a minute?
Please, whore yourself out, man.
No, I just want to invite whoever's listening, if they're curious, come to my YouTube channel. It's just Leland Sklar channel, and it started completely by accident. And every day I play another song that I've recorded, and then I tell all the backstories about the process and who was involved and all kinds of stuff. And it's really developing a remarkable following on it, and there's a clubhouse you can join and all kinds of crap going on. So it's really made me feel so engaged still, rather than sitting home going, I wish all my gigs hadn't been canceled. Yeah.
And that's the beauty of digital technology. When I sit here and have conversations, because my show goes an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes.
Yeah.
YouTube life does not exist that long.
No.
So I mean, it'll take time to get my views up, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But I still find it astonishing that I upload this to the podcast, I get 25,000 hits, but I go live, I get maybe 20. It's amazing to me.
Crazy.
It is. It's so funny. But I'm glad that you're utilizing YouTube in the positive way that some people don't, to really again let people feel music in ways that they just didn't know existed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's a shared community, man. It's like I'm learning things from people that are writing into me in my comments section, going, "Oh man, if this is what you're into, man, check these guys out, or this group, or this artist." And it's a real two-way street, which is really wonderful, because that to me is what it's always been. I've never felt that the stage was a separation from an audience. I just felt we were all one family out there.
Yep. And, as long as music continues, people will continue to feel that way.
Yeah, I hope so.
And we have people like you to thank for that. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the format to come visit.
Dude, again, it's been nothing but an honor and a privilege on my part. So I appreciate it.
Well, great, man. Well, stay safe. That's the main thing right now for everybody. Man. It's some scary times out there. Don't fall prey to nonsense, man. Really just keep yourself and your family and friends as safe as you possibly can.
Exactly. You too, man. I appreciate it.
Cool.
But we'll talk again soon.
I would love to, Derek, man. You take care, and just remember, suck it.
That's right. Thank you, sir. You have a good one.
Okay, you too, man. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, what a legend. What a cool-ass guy. So that was Wednesday. Doesn't get much better than that, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please come back again tomorrow, 8 p.m. East, 5 p.m. West. I have the lead singer of Ashes to Omens, James Branton, on with me. We're going to talk a little bit of metal and have some more music talk. It's been a music-full week this week. So come back tomorrow. I appreciate and love everybody. Y'all have a great rest of your night, and we will see y'all tomorrow. And remember, always stay healthy, stay happy, and stay fucking heavy. Peace.